Yeah. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Education and Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I do need to advise you that we are live webcast streaming for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's YouTube channel. And members of the press or public may record and take photographs, except where there are confidential items. We have got some apologies from Rabia Sharmi, and have got a number of colleagues who are running late because of transport issues this morning. So we're going to move to item 3 on the agenda, which is appointment of the committee chair and deputy chair. And we're noting that the council at its meeting on the 24th of May appointed the committee and the chair and members to serve on this committee for the period ending with the annual meeting in 2023. Members of the committee are myself, Councillor Kerry Jenkins, Shabina Bano, Julie Birmingham, Des Hughes and Shayla Maldina, Debbie Clancy, Simon Morrell and Mariam Jan. We need to elect our deputy chair this morning, and at the previous informal meeting we did have a nomination from Councillor Hughes, so I just asked the committee to endorse that now, please. Thank you very much. Item 4 is asking for a declaration of interests, and members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Are there any declarations today? Councillor Hughes.
Just for the record, Chair, I was employed by us until April of this year. I'm not employed by them anymore, but I'm just raising it as in the interest of transparency.
Thank you very much. Item 5 on the agenda are our... Oh, sorry, Sarah.
I'm Chair of All Saints Mat, Chair of BD Mat, and I'm a member of the Ferretti Trust, all of which have got Birmingham schools.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I must tell you that these are for reading, and when I have them on, I can't see distance, so do let me know if you have your hands up. Item 5 are our terms of reference. So this is just for noting. I'm hoping that you've all had a look at this. And any comments, I don't think there are any necessary. It's very straightforward for us. The committee here to deal with education matters, and it also includes in its membership our co-opted members and the following voting representatives: Church of England Diocese Representative, Roman Catholic Diocese Representative, and a Parent Governor, 2 Parent Governor representatives. Item 6 on the agenda are action notes. The last formal meeting, which was held on the 30th of March, and I'm not aware of any updates. Amanda, is that?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Item 7 on the agenda is our SEND presentation, and we have Sue Harrison presenting to us today. Who he's going to say
Of our children in Birmingham, which all take all out of that, because no, with children achieve and thrive, they need to feel safe, they need to feel healthy and be well enough to school or their team and all that, and they need to be included. And we've spent quite some time this last few weeks discussing with our partners and with our head teachers in particular, what does good inclusion look like? And that debate and discussion will continue, and we will agree on definition actually of inclusion. But very much inclusion isn't just about getting a child over the doorway of an institution. It's about them being genuinely able to participate, having friends, being able to enjoy socialising, being able to enjoy their learning. So what we do in our SEND improvement journey is absolutely critical to delivering our whole city vision of Birmingham. And so the culture change that we are all delivering in our partnership is very much to identify and support young people early, aim to get it right first time, professionals and services that don't expect children and young people to reach our thresholds, but reach out and around our children and people. Probably most importantly, have that strength-based approach. So focusing on what children and young people can do, while we recognise need support, not really focusing on those strengths and creating that independent young person that we all want to see. And that's got to be about building relationships. And certainly in the Senate service, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, they're really focusing on support and relationships. Vision is that our young people are all safe, healthy, included, confident and achieving, and that they're supported direct from governments and management, engaged staff and clear strategy, and a staff who are partnership workers by default, not having to make an effort to work in partnership, but that is part of our journey. And our journey of improvement is to make sure that we achieve that vision. Clearly, our SEND improvement journey is part of that, and it's a key part, but it's not the only thing. And delivering our accelerated progress plan is absolutely critical and a non-negotiable, but delivering that in itself will not deliver the culture change that we know we want to see. There was a really significant milestone for us back in June, which was the 6-month stop take, and the division Victor will take us through what they found. The first milestone actually around the sending route to show you that we won't be able to, that's not when things don't go to plan. We've got I'll just to know I'll remember. Hopefully, yeah. If not, I'll carry on. Yeah.
Between the online participants.
Apologies, Chair. The connection for some unknown reason is extremely patchy, and we, us online, and we've put that in the chat, can only hear like every other fourth word. So I do apologize. Sue, did you say it's for me to come in? And can everybody hear me clearly? Okay. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. I'm Victor Roman. I'm the SEND Improvement Programme Manager for Birmingham. This is a compact of the slides that were presented at the SEND Improvement Board in terms of our 6-monthly stock take of the Accelerated Progress Plan, and I'm now going to run you through them. If you don't mind, just because of the technology issues in terms of the connection, if we can get questions at the end, I would really much appreciate that. So what you can see now on the slide is, of course, the governance for the SEND Improvement Programme and the Accelerated Progress Plan. The Accelerated Progress Plan has been split into 4 objectives: systems leadership, getting the basics right, working together well, and pathways. And each of them have an operational management group, which meets on a monthly basis, more or less. All of that gets reported into the SEND management group, which includes the senior responsible officers of all of those objective management groups that I've said about previously. And that, of course, reports into the SEND Improvement Board, which is chaired by the DFE appointed Commissioner John Coughlin. And it has members representation on the board. It has the Parent Care Reform on the board. It has membership from the education settings, from a wide variety of education settings in Birmingham. throughout the whole piece, of course, everything we do, we try as much as possible to co-produce with the Birmingham Parent Care Forum, with local area professionals, with elected members, with the Rise Youth Forum, with the vulturing community sector, and with education settings. Next slide, please. Thank you. I have now turned my camera off. That might help with the connection. So in terms of what we've talked about, in terms of the objectives, the 4 objectives, each of the objectives is looking at at 3 areas of significant weakness each. So in the initial inspection in 2018, there were 13 areas of significant weaknesses identified by Ofsted and CQC. After the revisit, we have managed to make sufficient progress in 1 of them. However, the outstanding 12 areas of significant weakness have been split into the 4 objectives, 3 each. So we're going to go through now each objective in turn. So the first one is around system leadership. And we are currently in the process of refreshing the SEND strategy with a view of having a final draft version by the end of November 2022, with member and CCG, or now better said ICB governance sign off after that. The strategy is currently being co-produced as a partnership piece, and it will link intrinsically with the inclusion strategy, the SEND sufficiency strategy, and the overarching children's plan. We're also currently working on joint working protocols that have been agreed in principle for the EHC needs assessment process at the local senior leaders level, from health education and social care. And we're all committed to working better, more efficiently. As part of that joint working protocol, we're currently designing a suite of standard operating procedures so that everybody knows exactly what they need to do and when they need to do it. Agencies are engaged in developing a multi-professional training needs analysis to ensure local multi-professionals learning and development programs upskills the teams with SEND knowledge. In terms of visitors of the SEND local offer each month, they've been consistent at an average of about 25,000 over the past 12 months. These are new views against a target of 16,000. And if I remember correctly, before the accelerated progress plan was in place, we averaged about 15,000 views per month. Work has continued with education settings and partners in embedding good practice and crystallizing what good looks like. And as a result, we now have 31% of children and young people with education, health and care plans educated in a mainstream environment. So that is about 2,835 children, compared to 26% in May 2021 when we had the revisit, which was about 2,278 children and young people. We acknowledge that this only shows distance travel rather than impact, and SEND sufficiency around special school placements might be a contributor for these figures. Next slide, please. I'm not entirely sure if it is a delay, but I can't see the next slide yet. So if it is on your screen, I might have to look at my screen and continue. So in terms of objective 2, which is getting the basics right, we have recruited 50+ new officers into SENAR service and have increased capacity to complete the casework. The initial number of service staff was around 24 at the time of the revisit last year. What we've also done is rearranged the SENAR team into 4 area teams, North, East, South and West, for reviews, and aligned them for both assessments and reviews, and aligned them, the annual reviews teams are in 4 teams, North, East, South and West, and we have 1 assessments team that is aligned also across those 4 areas. We've also reviewed and co-produced the new Education, Health and Care Plan and EHC Needs Assessments templates and all the associated documents. And as a result of this, I'm pleased to inform the committee that in terms of school-phase transfers, 90.91% of reception placements were confirmed by the statutory deadline. That's 121 out of 132 plans. 96.5% of year 2 placements were confirmed, which is 29 out of 30, and 98.82% of secondary placements were confirmed. That's 677 out of 685. This compares to 0% last year. So we've done a lot of work to be able to meet those statutory deadlines. We've also improved on the 20-week statutory compliance in education, health and care needs assessments to 65% of assessments being completed within 20 weeks. And that is on a 12-monthly rolling average. That is 813 plans issued on time out of 1,245 new plans issued within those 12 months. And that compares to a 53% statutory compliance in the 12 months previous to May 2021, that being 524 plans completed in time out of 989 plans finalized. That also compares to 65%, which is the national average. So we finally reached the national average. We've also been making progress on addressing the annual reviews backlog. The percentage of annual reviews actioned within 4 weeks of the meeting was 0.4% in September 2021, 1 out of 239 annual reviews. And our latest performance for May 2022 was 25%, 158 out of 632 annual reviews. It's not great, but it's getting better. It is about being on the journey on a trajectory. Also, with more appropriate casework now in place, there's been a reduction in the number of children and young people that are not in education, employment, training with EHCPs from 9% in May 2021 to 4% in May 2022. I have also realized that the slides are no longer on the screen. So what I could do, I can share from my end. If that is helpful. In terms of objective 3, which is around working together well, the SEND local area leadership in collaboration with Birmingham Parent Care Forum are working together to increase parent care satisfaction and engagement in SEND services and by embedded co-production. All of this has been informed the co-drafting of a co-production framework and chapter, and it has actually been signed off at the SEND Improvement Board in July. And that includes Parent Cares Forum, active parents, carers, children, young people. This agreement is a shared definition, principles, approach and committee to co-production in Birmingham. Parent care initiatives have included engagement undertaken with parent carers to design the APP, 8 Have Your Say events for parents and carers between December 2021 and March 2022. 93 parents and carers attended either online or in person at these events. This has, of course, offered great opportunity to gather feedback and to also establish principles of co-production and values. A parent care survey was undertaken in May 2022, which had 788 responses. This compares to the previous bigger response rate we've ever had in Birmingham, which was 378 responses in 2019 and 226 responses in 2018. We're also working with Objective 2 to develop a parent portal so that parents, carers and young people have more sight of the stages with the statutory process of EHCNAs and annual reviews. And we're currently working on a SEND youth participation strategy, and we have a group that's working on that. After July 2022, we will be working to embed co-production across the local area. These are the survey findings from the survey I've just spoken about. As you can see, in terms of overall satisfaction with SEND services, 32% say they are very good and good. If they only have, if they have only one service involved, whereas if there are multiple services that are involved, only 70% say that the services are good or very good. Also, in terms of the local offer, 65% unfortunately of parents never used the local offer, or the response of the survey never used the local offer, but those that have used it, 37% think it's useful or very useful. This, of course, these survey findings will offer us a baseline to continue to monitor this in the future. Objective 4, which is around pathways. First, in terms of academic progress, we have some developing local provision headlines here. Many secondary and primary projects have evidence of good impact. The secondary DLP Fair Access project has strong evidence of pupils off-rolling returning back to school quickly. The post-16 project reporting reduction in year 12 needs. There is high teacher engagement and schools working together to improve provision and develop capacity in their localities. The consortia network infrastructure strengthened due to collaborative working. Additional resources. Oh, sorry.
Live stream.
Yeah, we're back in. So, do you want to read just say, are we live again? I don't know, I'll just check. Are we back?
A clue what's happened there. It hasn't. Did we connect through this device here? It's still on. It's lost connection.
Yeah.
I'll go and get me back over the road. I'll just go and
Just say, are we live again? I don't know, I'll just.
really close.
Okay, are we back?
A clue what's
Live streamed.
Is it?
Yeah, I've just got on YouTube and it is.
So, do you want to just?
Thanks everybody, and watching Thank you for being very patient. We are having real difficulties this morning. So, just a recap of this presentation, the key Thank you, everybody, and welcome back to the Education and Children's Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and apologies for the technical challenges. What I'm going to do is ask Sue Harrison, who is Director of Children's Services, to give us a recap on the presentation that we received a short while ago, and then we'll go over to committee members to take questions. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Chair. And you've all had the presentation and seen the 4 main areas and some of the green shoots and some of the improvement that we're beginning to see. But again, managing that message, we know we've got a long way to go. So to summarise, we have worked really hard across our partnership actually at putting in the required foundations, and we've used the image of, you know, a house that needs to be completely refurbished while people are living in the house. And there's lots of them you should use, but the house one is quite good because we know that without firm foundations, anything we build on top of rocky foundations isn't going to be built to last. And so it is difficult because you don't always see the benefits of putting those foundations in. And I do share frustrations of parents who are saying, when are we going to see change? When are we going to see change? But we're starting to see some change, and we will continue to be held to account because we've had the plan published now. We needed to have DFE sign off before it could be published. So the reason it's taken a while to be published is due to going through that civil service process, actually, it's never solved. But now that plan, the APP, is in the public domain, we are challenged, rightly so, on progress against that plan by the Sending Improvement Board, chaired by our DFE appointed Sending Commissioner. Some members of this committee are actually on that board. But we're also expecting to be regular updates to this committee. So we think, you know, I don't think we know that we put required foundations in place. And of course, we continue to build relationships, underpin ongoing improvements, and continuing to build relationships with our parents and parents is really important, as well as our partners. So to sum up, we do have a lot more to do, but we have the right commitment, and we do have strategic leadership in place and delivery plans in place to ensure that we'll have steady incremental change, and we'll be bringing back regular reports to show against the APP and how we've met those milestones. And that change will deliver the sustainable system that continually improves, because we will never finish this improvement journey. We're moving from a really bad place into being functional. When we're at functional, which I think will be a year away, when we're at functional, we will then look to move into great. But for now, I think we have grasped some really uncomfortable metals. We've had some difficult conversations with our parents, and we're listening to parents and continuing to improve. But it is a slow job, and it is a big tanker to turn, absolutely doable, and we're all confident that it will be done. And hopefully what you're seeing today is some evidence that we're starting to do that. But happy to take any questions, and if Victor can hear, I might bring Victor in to answer some. Can you hear us now, Victor?
I can indeed, sir.
Okay, great. Well, over to you, Chair, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Sue. We might have to have our big voices on today if we have the noise coming in from outside, but there's not a lot we can do about that. I know that Councillor Clancy and Councillor Hughes want to ask some questions. I'll take others. Thank you very much. So, Councillor Clancy.
Yeah, I'm reading from my screen because I've made some notes before the meeting. So I know you said that it's been built on a rocky foundation. We need to have a more secure foundation, because I first sat on education back in 2015, and to be perfectly honest, you know, it's quite disconcerting because even though I have been on this committee for some time, it almost feels, well, 2022, I was on this committee in 15, here we go again, so to speak. And many will feel that way because we're 7 years on, and goodness me, we're in the same boat again. What's really changed? So it is disconcerting because even though the work is there to be done, it's almost as if why we're at this stage when we were at this stage back in 2015 and before. Victor, I don't know if you want to answer a couple of my questions I've got. I just wanted to refer my first point to the part where it says under the system leadership. It talks about a sufficiency plan as being completed by the 31st of July. but co-produce desired outcomes not completing until the 31st of August. It just seems odd that you would agree a sufficiency plan before you've actually determined the outcomes. It just seems a very odd way of putting it. Is that genuine co-production? And that's my first question. It just seems with the dates together, why would you do one and then the other? It just doesn't seem to co-produce with the way that's being read in the document. So I just wanted to mention that. The KPIs you've chosen to measure, it just feels like it's coming across in the document that you're measuring some of those anyway. That would be standard. It's a little bit odd how it reads in parts. I'll give you an example just to put some context around it. Under the system leadership, you've got a measure of percentages of pupils in the HCP educated in mainstream environment. But actually, it is a moral and legal duty to place a child in an appropriate setting, any appropriate setting, yet this refers to mainstream environment. So I just wondered what your thoughts are on that, because we have talked about inclusion has been mentioned previously in the briefing that we've just had. Also, the attendance at training. The attendance alone doesn't really mean anything, so I wondered what the difference the training was making around that. I don't know if that's something you can comment on. And I just want to refer very quickly to the EHC plan through 20 weeks. Going back to 2015, as I said, we had this problem then where there was outstanding week, and I see that the figures now are sort of levelling out at some point. But actually, if you just dig a bit deep there, I just want to refer to the figures. So just for members' case, there's legal duty is probably 20 weeks on the EHCP, as you know. But it shows that the failure to meet legal duty in 42% of the cases, and even the 24-month target, were failing to meet that legal duty 1 in every 5 children. So I suppose what it doesn't show is what happens if they don't hit the 20 weeks, I suppose is what I'm saying. What happens and how much longer is it after that?
Thanks, Councillor Clancy. Victor, you've got quite a few questions there. So if you want to take those first.
Chair, can I, you've got the sufficiency one, because that's not really a big.
Yeah, of course. So when it comes to that.
Thank you, Councillor, for those questions, and apologies. The noise from the room. I don't think I've heard the last question very well, but I'll do my best to answer. In terms of the data, the KPIs, the benefits realization monitoring element of the accelerated progress plan, that needs to be twofold. One is with data, and the other bit should be with qualitative research and feedback from parents and carers and young people and so on and so forth. You've mentioned the KPI that has to do with pupils with education, health and care plans educated in mainstream. I think we've had this conversation as a partnership as well with education settings as well. It's not per se a target in terms of that we need to meet. We all recognize that children, young people with education, health and care plans or special educational needs or absolute typical children need to be educated in appropriate provision, whatever that provision might be. The distinguishment is that in law, there is a presumption to mainstream. And also nationally speaking, currently, the average of pupils with education, health and care plans educated in mainstream schools is around 50% as per the latest government research and for the Green Paper. Also in the Green Paper, there is a lot of conversation and there is a lot of hints. I wouldn't call them hints. I would call them strategic vision around most children in education, health and care plans being educated in mainstream where appropriate, of course. There is something about increasing capacity in mainstream school and specialization so that mainstream schools can cater for those special education needs, so that special schools are left for those with the highest, most complex special educational needs for which they would cater for. So I hope that gives you a flavor of why that bit is in there in terms of the accelerated progress plan. Birmingham has a very, very low incidence of education, health and care plans in mainstream schools for a variety of reasons, but that is something we need to look at, and ensure that mainstream schools are properly empowered to meet those needs in mainstream school. With regards to the 20-week assessment process and the fact that back in 2015 it was also very similar in terms of the not hitting that 100%. That again is also a national issue. It's not something that Birmingham is an outlier in. Like I said, we've currently reached national average in terms of completing EHC needs assessment in 20 weeks. It is not an excuse. It's not good enough. It also has to do with the balance of staffing across the partnership in terms of being able to provide adequate advice for the EHC needs assessment. What happens if the 20-week process is not done within 20 weeks? It creates massive discomfort to families, meet our statutory requirements, but that doesn't mean that the education, health and care plan is not completed, even if it's within 22 weeks, 23 weeks, 24 weeks, 26 weeks. There has been also a national pressure at the point of change of legislation in 2014 with the Children and Families Act, when that statutory timescale moved from 26 weeks to 20 weeks. And I don't think, in my personal view, sufficient new burdens were considered by government to be given in order for local authorities and local area partnerships to be able to fully address that. So what I'm trying to say is that statutory compliance with the EHC needs assessment process is a national issue, which we're hoping that it will be addressed through the Green Paper, and we'll be working hard to increase that. 100% at the moment, I think there are very few local authorities in the country that do it. And most authorities that do it are with extremely few education, health and care plans, such as, I don't know, the City of London that has about 20 education, health and care plans in the whole of the authority. Have I answered most of your questions, leaving aside the question around sufficiency that I'm leaving for Sue?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you, Victor. I'll go over to Sue.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Victor. So thanks, Councillor, for the question about sufficiency, because we're in the middle of a big piece, well, nearly towards the end actually, a big piece of sufficiency work with the capital team are looking at producing a strategic plan which we need to have for resources moving forward. And that's at every stage of a child's needs. So it's highly likely we're going to need more special school places, and we might well be looking at bidding for 1 or 2 free special schools in the next, well, we're putting an expression of interest to the government in the next wave of free schools. The only way we can have additional special schools now is through that process, councils can't help their own anymore. So I think what we're going to need is more resource provision in mainstream, because the model is wherever possible, we want children to be able to attend their local school, keep their friendships. Where that's not possible, then of course we want the right specialist provisions in the right places. So the map that I'm quite happy to bring it to this committee when we finish it, because that piece of work is critical in looking at future need and the current need. We know we've got pressure points, for example, around providing children with autism, particularly high-performing autistic children. And so we want to put provision in that as well. So I'm bringing in a map that covers highly specialist, resource provision, and of course, quality first teaching. And it was a good question you asked about, it's good to measure the attendance at trade, but what is the impact? And what is the impact on schools? And we're starting the conversation with our head teachers about how can we better support SENCOs and better support teachers so that they can have the best toolkit that they can access to support young people and make reasonable adjustments in their classroom. So this isn't about pigeonholing young people into certain types of provision. It's about starting off with their needs and making sure as a city we've got adequate provision. And at the moment, as I say here, we haven't, have we? Because we know we've got some young people who are waiting for special school place, and that special school place does not exist. We're working hard to expand existing provision wherever we can, and this again will be in the sufficiency strategy to be as quick as we can to provide those places, because obviously it takes a very years to go to school. So I'm happy to share that information as it comes forward, but we are working hard on it.
Thanks, Sue. Thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Hughes next.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Clancy's point was very well made. The thing is, I'm actually even more confused now about what is the target in the plan, when we clearly have got children in primary schools who are on
in some instances in for an hour a day because their needs can't be met, or there are a number of pupils with such needs in school, so they can't all be in at the same time, and we've got a waiting list of pupils waiting for a secondary school place. To me, that just makes a target redundant. But that you've answered Councillor Clancy's point. I've got a few points I'd like to make. The GBR2 annual reviews actions within 4 weeks of the meeting. I mean, again, I know Victor has mentioned that we are aware of the statutory requirements, and it is a statutory requirement that they're actioned within 4 weeks. But from the plan, it does look like in November 21, there were 3.1% of annual reviews completed within the legal time frame, and this refers to 195 cases, which would suggest that there are over 6,000 annual reviews waiting to be done. In April 22, it stated that 25% of all annual reviews were actioned within 4 weeks. This, according to the plan, represents 346 cases, which would suggest there are over 1,300 DHCPs waiting for review. So, can you tell me, is it right there were only 1,394 DHCPs to be reviewed in April when there were over 6,000 in the previous November?
Chair, I'm more than happy to pick up that question. I think it's worth noting, Councillor Hughes, that the data that I've presented is about the number of annual reviews completed within the 4 weeks from the meeting happening. It does not show the number of annual reviews that have been completed, even if it was 5 or 6 weeks or 7 weeks or 8 weeks after the actual meeting of the annual reviews. I can reassure you, Councillor, that at the moment there are not 11,000 or 13,000 education, health and care plans that have not been reviewed. That indicator only looks at those that have been reviewed within 4 weeks. Most of them have been reviewed or actioned within 4 weeks of the review. That's what the indicator shows. It doesn't talk about the amount of annual review, but we can look at that data and we can bring it back. That wouldn't be a problem of how many annual reviews have been actioned in total, apart from those that were actioned within 4 weeks, if that makes any sense.
Yes,
and also, apologies, Councillor, the data for the annual reviews that you have in front of you is for that month. It's not the 12-monthly average. So that is the number of annual. So if you look at slide, apologies, Councillor, if you look at slide number 6, which talks about the May 2022, so 158 out of 632. So in May 2022, 632 annual reviews have been completed only in that month, out of which 158 were completed within the 4 weeks from the annual review was actually held. That makes any sense, Councillor?
Okay, I'm not going to labour this. Clearly, I am misunderstanding something. But my question was that this plan seems to indicate that there were only 1,300 EHCPs to be reviewed in April, and there were 6,000 the previous November. Obviously, I'm misunderstanding something. I will go back and examine my mathematics. But it does, at the very least, it makes the data in the plan confusing. I'm going to come on to another question, if that's all right.
Just bear with me a second, Councillor. Karen, did you want to come in on that point?
Yes, I don't think it's Councillor Hughes's maths. I think there's a jump in that bullet point from the annual review backlog to the annual reviews actioned, and I think that's what's causing the confusion. There's a missing bit that's about the number of annual reviews actions. So if that gap can be filled, I think Councillor Hughes will be reassured.
Certainly, Victor, if we could have some of that data sent through so that we can share that. I think that would be very well accepted. Councillor Hughes?
One more category, and I'll shut up for a minute. I'm looking at WTW6, the number of appeals lodged at Sendist. First of all, as I said earlier, I did work for Sendist for until April, and I think the data is inaccurate. Until April, for at least 10 months before that, our current Sendist team were assisting parents with 50 appeals a month, every month. And that adds up to a significant number of appeals. The reason I'm raising it here is I'm not sure why that's a target. I don't see, for instance, I'm pretty sure Ofsted didn't say, there's too many appeals to Sendist in Birmingham. And also, trying to reduce the number of appeals, to my mind, there's two ways you can do that. You could basically, use a Sendist, which is helping people with a massive amount of those appeals. You could make it difficult for them to provide that support to parents. And that would have a very quick effect, I would think, on the number of appeals lodged. A side effect of that would be that we would have literally hundreds of people not getting their needs assessed properly and not in suitable schools. And the reason I say that so confidently is because the vast majority of those appeals to the tribunal are upheld by the tribunal, which means that the local authority's decision making was wrong in the first place. Now, if you generally want to reduce the number of appeals, it seems to me that the obvious way to do that is to improve the decision making of the local authority. And that isn't what this target says. So I am concerned about how the target is going to be achieved. And I'm very concerned that it's actually coming at the issue from back to front. That's it, I'll shut up.
Okay, thanks. I'm not sure whether there was a question there, more of an observation.
Well, there is a question, Chair. How do they intend to reduce the number of appeals? And why is the data in the plan not reflective of the reality?
I'll let Victor address the data, but absolutely agree. The way that we'll reduce the number of tribunals is to get the decision making right in the first place, and how appropriate mediation, which is generally listening to parents and working with parents. So that's why it's a target, because obviously when something goes to a tribunal, relationships are broken down between the service and the family, and that is not the culture that we want. So that's why we've got the target. But I'll hand over to Victor for the technical expertise about where that figure's come from. Victor?
Thank you, Sue. And thank you, Councillor Hughes. Just as a point of clarification, Councillor Hughes, if you're referring to the numbers that are on page 26 of the revised accelerated progress plan that is published on the local offer, if that is the document you're referring to and you're referring it to as a target, I would have to note that it's an actual, it only presents the actuals. We don't have a target for number of appeals. As Sue rightfully said, we need to reduce appeals just because, as Sue rightfully said, we need to make appropriate decisions at the appropriate time. But there wouldn't be a target. It would be inconceivable for us to put a target on appeals, because that would somehow circumvent the right of young people or parents to actually exercise their right into appealing. So we wouldn't be able to put a target to it. We would like to see as little appeal as possible, because we would like to make the appropriate decisions and or resolve disagreements through mediation or dispute resolution before it goes to an appeal, as appeals are 1, costly, 2, convoluted, and 3, lengthy processes, which if we could avoid by making appropriate decision, as you said, Councillor, or by reaching an agreement before going to appeal, that would be ideal. But I would have to say that in the published version of the Accelerated Progress Plan, there is no target as to appeals. In terms of the data that you see as actuals in the Accelerated Progress Plan on that particular page, that is the data we have from the appeals team, and that data is the official data in terms of appeals that have been received from first-tier tribunal, not necessarily families requesting support with an appeal or wanting to go to appeal or expressing an interest in appeal. That is the data that we get back from first-tier tribunal.
Thanks, Victor. I've just got a question on the HCPs before I go over to Councillor Morell. In terms of, do we have any baseline information on the quality of the HCPs? Because that was something that was raised in the Ofsted back in 2018. Who's rating the quality of the HCPs? Is that done externally? And if it's not done externally, are we then marking our own homework?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the quality of the educational health and care plans, there's two parts to this question. One is around the operational quality. So in terms of the operational quality, all advice, an educational health and care plan is as good as the advice that we receive from other professionals. That includes educational psychology service, advisory teachers, health, social care. And each of these agencies have their own quality assurance mechanisms through which team managers check advice before it's sent through to the local authority through SENA in order to compile an education health and care plan. In terms of that bit in the accelerated progress plan of quality assuring education health and care plans and actually putting a figure to it, we're talking there about multi-agency audits. Multi-agency audits we haven't been focusing on them as of yet. And I'm saying as of yet just because we're going to start a new process from the autumn on this, because we're trying to get the basics right in terms of having the right processes, right templates, agencies contributing appropriately to the education, health and care needs assessment and so on and so forth before we actually start quality assuring. We have procured or we have re-procured a tool which is called Envision 360, which is a national tool for quality assuring education, health and care plans. From memory, there are 30 plus local authorities that use that tool, and the questions are set by the provider, and they have been co-produced across local authorities in terms of what are the right questions. Because of how the tool is created, it's not necessarily marking our own homework, because there are professional standards through which you can quality assure an educational health and care plan. Also, the beauty of using that tool is that it will give us a comparator with the other 30 plus local authorities that use the tool in terms of how we're doing with our own education, health and care plan, so we can see trends and so on and so forth. Like I said, that new baseline we will create in the autumn, and we will have, I think, quarterly multi-agency audits on it in order to inform and look at the progress data on it.
Thank you, Victor. I've got 4 more committee members to bring in, and I am conscious of time, so I'll go to Councillor Morell next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sue and Victor, for the presentation. Also, I sit here and listen to Des around it a little bit more, actually. I think the burning question has to be, how is this going to be any different to last time? As my colleagues already pointed out, we've been here before, we've had these sort of reports, and things never really improve. So what is the plan really how is this different, and how are you ensuring that vision, the golden thread of that vision is running through everything that you're doing, and also critically, how are you measuring that? Which brings me on to the Kpis. A lot of them tend to be survey-based, but it's not really clear how they've really been carried out. So if I look at my notes here, at what point in the process are people being surveyed? Because that could have a big impact on, how, if they respond at all. And I want to touch on the EHCP in particular around needs. I think it'd probably be more useful to split these between those in specialist provision and those who are in mainstream, because the vast majority of young people in specialist provision go into special placements all the way up until they're 19, whereas those in the mainstream thread will leave school at 16, and therefore you could make the argument that there's going to be a high proportion of needs. Now, we did a good question on this. The number of children waiting for specialist placements, there appears to be a very concerning and dramatic rise in the numbers here. So it was 77 in May 2021, 143 in November 21, and in April 2022 it was 553. That's a 7-fold increase. What is causing this? there also needs to be much more of a breakdown within the KPIs, so it's a bit more meaningful. How many are out of education? How many are receiving home produced support? How many are in mainstream schools part-time? How many are in mainstream schools full-time, but are waiting additional funding to be provided? It's all very vague, and I think we'd like a bit more detail. And finally, touching on what was mentioned with Sendias, I'm not sure where the baseline comes from. You've already touched on this. The data seems to be a bit wishy-washy. So in May 21, baseline was 20, they said it was 25. Sorry, it was 25, not 21. And there's already been said by Des, the overall average since January was, we got down a figure of 58.2. Des touched on that too, it was 50. So given the length of time it takes and the fact that many are still being denied their right for an appeal, what reassurances can we have that the data that we're actually reading in this is correct, given that there does seem to be quite a lot of discrepancies, not just in this, but in other reports that I've seen so far in my time in this position.
Thank you, Councillor Morrell. Sue?
Thanks, Councillor Morrell. There's an awful lot of questions in there, aren't there? So I'll hand over to Victor some of the technical data questions. But in answer to your first question, which is a really good question, what will be different this time? Because of course, I wasn't here, Victor wasn't here, and many of the team weren't here. But you have lived this before. All I can say is the reassurance I would give is the fact that we haven't had the governance in place that we've had before. We haven't had a Department for Education commissioner that is keeping a very beady eye on the progress that Birmingham is making and has powers to intervene if we don't make sufficient progress. So it's not an option not to move forward. I think compared to other places here now, the level of accountability, and rightly so, is the highest that I've ever seen it, and the level of scrutiny. And so it should be, because we've had plans in the past that for whatever reason weren't delivered. These plans will be delivered. I think the other aspects of this, that it might be different. I think partners have always been engaged, but we're being very open about the role that different partners play in the SEND improvement journey, and holding partners to account through, for example, the Birmingham Children's Partnership, as well as through the SEND Improvement Board. We didn't have a formal SEND Improvement Board that was chaired with the Commissioner before. This APP could have been better co-produced. We had timelines for the DFE to produce it, but since we've started the APP, we've worked really closely with our Parent Carer Forum, and the culture shift that we need to see will be developed. And I've spoken at length to my team about the need to deliver and to not overpromise and underdeliver, but actually say what we're going to do and just do it. And I think you'll see some signs of that already in the on-school transport, aka the Children's Travel Service presentation later today. You'll see evidence of that in the new school term, and we will continue to set reasonable targets and deliver them. And that will be the way that we'll deliver, that we'll earn that trust back, because I think officers have got to earn that trust back with our parents and families and with members as well. Happy to come to this committee, happy to have meetings with different groups of politicians to be completely open and transparent about where we are and about what we're doing, because we're all on the same team. We all actually want the same thing, which is improvements for children and families, lived experience, their lived experience to get better. I don't want to be over-egging any progress that we're making. I also don't want to disrespect our staff by not saying, you know what, the staff must do things differently now. We've got double the amount of staff in our Senate team. We had caseloads that were unmanageable. Now we've got caseloads that are doable. We've got a lot of agency staff, because that's the only way that I would appoint those posts. So papers will come forward in the autumn about substantive staffing structure that will be enable us to meet the need long term and be sustainable. I think your question is right about how do we know that this time it will work, and it's just so sad that in 2015 councillors could recognise what we're saying now back in 2015. But all I can say is I will keep coming back here, and these are hard yards of progress that we're making. Because as Victor's just said, a good education, health and care plan isn't just a council plan. It relies on advice from numerous people, and schools have really felt the pressure of a failing SEND service. So we will fix the SEND service. That in itself, though, won't be enough, which is why we're looking at system leadership and why we're looking at delivering a culture shift. So hopefully, words are easy out to say, it's the actions that will deliver. And in terms of the KPIs, so that's how we're going to measure the difference. We want to put in a robust quality assurance process. When you say, when do we survey parents? At the moment, we're reaching out to parents at very different stages of the process. We will, though, have a system where we're ringing them up to the completion of the plan, to say, how was that for you? How can we learn from that experience? And we'll feed those results in as they come. But at the minute, we've just got a very generalised approach to feedback. And I absolutely accept that that's not granular enough, but it's a starting point, and we will move forward to make it more granular with actually the help and support of our elected members, because it's you who has the surgeries where families are coming to say, this is our lived experience, and hearing that through you is really important. So that's my bit about the first question. In terms of the KPIs and the targets, Victor, are you okay to pick those bits up?
Yes, Sue, thank you. So Sue talked about the survey element of it, and that is, as Sue said, it is intrinsically linked with the quality assurance piece, because if we do surveys, satisfaction survey at key points of the process, that will also feed into the quality assurance bit. In terms of Councillor, when you made the suggestion or you asked about delaying parents' right of appeal or refusing parents' right of appeal, and I'm glad the chair of the Parent Care Forum is in the room today, because we've had these conversations last year, actually, if I remember correctly, during the phase transfers between primary and secondary school, between early years and primary schools, and so on and so forth. And there was a massive issue because the plans were not compiled in the statutory framework, which, as Sabia would attest, does not grant sufficient time for parents and carers and families and young people to actually exercise their right of appeal in time. This year is a bit different, because this year we've actually managed a vast majority of them to be finalised within the statutory timescales, thus providing families, parents, carers, young people with the right of appeal at the right moment in time. Also, in terms of what you were saying around needs and about dissociating between needs, children missing education, children awaiting special school placement, so on and so forth, I would like to perhaps point out the difference between a child who is need and a child who's waiting special school placement, because a child who's waiting special school placement might already be educated within the mainstream environment or receive tuition, as you said, so those children would not count as being need. Also, in terms of the figure you used for those children, young people that are waiting special school placements, the last data that I have, which is May 2022, there were 293 children, young people awaiting a special school place. So that rate has again dropped from the number you've quoted, because we've worked hard to place those children, young people.
Thanks.
I hope that covers it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Victor. We have still got quite a few people that have indicated.
Can withdraw my name.
Thank you, Judy. I'm going to go straight to Sarah Smith.
Fine, thank you. Some of my questions have already been covered, but I'm just really, for me, I want to know, we've done a 6 month stock take. What did the DfE say about our progress, and what did the DfE say about the APP? And can I just say, I think it's really refreshing to have Victor's absolute detailed knowledge about all the things that he's talking about. Every question that's being put to you, Victor, you've got the detail, and that gives me some confidence that around the way you've approached that. So I just want to acknowledge that from my point of view.
Thank you. The DfE were very pleased with the stock take. Pleased with the amount of evidence, just like you said, really, that Victor and the team were able to present, because absolutely there is heaps of evidence behind everything that we put forward. And it was a really grueling deep dive, and again, rightly so. So I guess the summary that I put to you earlier is the summary that the DfE put to us. Well, so far so good, but let's think. They're happy with the plan. They think it's not going to solve everything, like sufficiency, but I reassured them that was being dealt with in other areas. But as an APP goes, Pat Tate, our DFE advisor, sits on our improvement board, and she works really closely with Victor and myself, actually, keeping an eye on things. The DFE want us to succeed as much as we want to succeed, and they want to help us. They couldn't see any flaws or any gaps in the plan, and I suppose a bit like Councillor Morell, they're saying, okay, well, now you've got to deliver it, and they want to support us all they can to deliver it, but in the end, each different officer and each different health worker and social worker will need to play their part in that, won't they? And that's where we're on the same page. So we were very pleased that it was very positive stock take. And of course, in 6 months, we will have another one and we will have more evidence on the ground, I think, at that point to show more progress, not just in the data, but in the qualitative and how is it for parents on the ground. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Councillor Barrow?
Yes, thank you, Sue. My question, what you're doing is fantastic. Thank you for that. I want to more towards the inclusion side and building relationships with the parents and engagement. Not just as a counsellor, but also as a specialist. I work with a lot of families across the in the community. And what I'm finding is there's still a lot of parents who are unaware, especially because of EAM, English as an additional language, they're struggling to understand education care plans, autism, they're really struggling to concept what's going on. The services, you mentioned something about why not so many people using the internet usage. I think 68% people who didn't use the offer. Again, how appropriate are these services? Culturally appropriate? Are we reaching out to those families who don't have English as a first language? Are they able to use the internet? We need more early intervention to reduce the pressure on the teachers in school, reduce the pressure of the education care plans once they come into school. Pilot schemes that I have done in the past 3-4 years in my local community is early sort of baby and parent drop-in centres, where we've had these centres, it's all voluntary, they come in, but we are able to identify needs where we know there's going to be, ADHD, autism, non-verbal. We can get the ball rolling, then we're lacking in that service. But I think if we want to reduce the pressure in schools and on teachers, we need to work on early intervention programs before the children came to school. I've got parents, when I have my surgeries, literally for 1 hour a day in school. The parents are struggling to understand how to cope. So we need to sort of empower the families as well, get them to understand what strategies they could put in place and get them to work with the schools. But I find the schools staffing, understanding and training, basically trying to understand SEN as well.
I think you've been very eloquent in the way you put that question and described the situation that we're in, actually. In terms of moving it forward, we are really focusing on early intervention, as you would say. So there's a few things we're doing in the background. One is looking again at our contract with Birmingham Children's Trust and colleagues in the trust to think about how do we commission them, to have them to the early help programme right at the right time, to have the right abilities to support with them, because they do support children with them really well, but I think we could always do more, we could do more sooner. So there's something about that commission that we're working on. There's also something about, we're trialling some locality working, which actually will come through the STEM Improvement Board. And that's a pilot way of working with Castlevale Nursery School and the Child Development Centre and the health people that run that and the Children's Centre. And we're having a new way of working, just scoping that project out to do something different in the first term. Because some of our young people, unfortunately, are waiting a long time for diagnosis. And what the STEM Improvement Board discussion was along the lines of, why do we wait for diagnosis? What support we put in while we are waiting for that diagnosis? So on that premise, this is just one pilot that is going to look at supporting very young children and absolutely their families as part of that package, so that children aren't starting school really not well prepared. So they're starting school, and okay, the diagnosis, what difference does that make anyway? If we're putting support in, why do we hang so much on diagnosis? Was the special discussions that we've had. I'm not saying it's not important, because clearly it is, but it's not a reason to hold any support until we get it. So putting supporting on the ground is really important, looking at how we shape that resource. And a lot of that resource sits with education, but a lot also sits with health. And it's that joint working, I think, that will be a bit of a game changer.
Absolutely. What I have seen, I'm really quick at this, is COVID stopped a lot of children, a lot of home visits happening, also health visitors. Young parents now are not seeing a health visitor until the child is 3, if they're lucky. That actually added on to the question. Parents I see are parents who have not seen a health visitor. Children's not having masters, no checks there. Then they come into school and they bombard, and they have no idea of special education. And then English is then as well. So doing those services, I would really emphasise if we could do something more cultural to get those cultural representatives out there within the main community and giving those special education.
Absolutely. I'm happy to speak back at another meeting how that's gone, because part of that is also using parent volunteers who have come through good support programs to support other people and become mentors. We haven't done that analysis that you were asking about culturally appropriate, because let's be frank, we're dealing with a service moving out of chaos and dysfunction, and it is. So that's not an excuse, because we would soon be in a place to absolutely have that granular data, but we don't have it now. We also are working really hard because and in fact got some pushback from schools who I appreciate are really under pressure, but they need to tell us when they're putting a child on a part-time timetable so that we can support that school and so that we can monitor that. And not all schools have done that in a timely fashion, which has meant we've been a bit on the back foot. So there's a whole piece of relationship building work with our schools to say, why do you feel that there's no option but to have a child in for a day a week? And how can we help you have a plan? Because obviously it might be short term. We can't have a child in school a day a week indefinitely. That's the school not delivering its statutory duty actually, as well as the council. So we're really pushing to have more oversight of that, and hence the new post that I'll be advertising after the summer now around an AD for thriving children and families, and that AD will help me to have more strategic oversight of those vulnerable children who are actually in real danger of falling through gaps in our system, which reassure you we are mapping those children school by school now. I've got an officer that's actually contacting every school. Of course, you're as good as that day, because the day after, a child could be on a part-time timetable, and I keep reinforcing it to the schools to tell us that, and we will support the schools with that. But I agree with everything you said, and we've started to think about that and moving forward.
Thanks, Sue. Thank you, Councillor Banner. Some really good points there. Councillor Hughes, you're going to be really quick because Sophia from the Parent Carer Forum has been waiting patiently to come in. So,
my apologies.
Councillor Hughes.
Just really quick, with regards to the GBR6, the phase transfers, I'm just wondering, does that KPI include EHCPs where the school is named by type? It's not unusual for such documents to say just mainstream school or secondary school, and on occasions it might say special school, but in the interim it still means that the child doesn't have an actual school for September. Is that part of the KPI?
From you, Victor.
First one today.
Sorry, caught off guard there, and I was on another screen trying to look for the exact data to respond to Councillor Hughes' very pertinent question. So yes, legally speaking, a plan that is named by type is legally binding. If you give me 1 second, I can tell you that so only 35 plans, so that's 5.3%, were finalized by school type. So 94.5 something, because the other one was 5 point something percent, were actually named with a school placement, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you. Sabia, you've been waiting really patiently, so thank you.
It was to respond mainly to Councillor's point around the issues that you raised. So we have a parent care forum in the city that a lot of people aren't aware of, and actually we're addressing the cultural needs. There's also a project running called the Autism Schools Project, that's running with 2 of our mainstream schools. That's a health initiative, and we have been able to access some of the areas that you talked about via those schools, and that project will be rolled out to more schools. Also, the local offer is actually available in different languages, as is the Birmingham Parent Care Forum website, and it's quite simple to be able to switch to different languages. I think really this is more about collaborative working and about getting that information out there, because we are, we're a voluntary organisation, we're independent of the council, but we are mindful that there's pockets of parents that we're not able to reach. There's 7 of us on the management committee that come from different parts of the city, but still, Birmingham is huge. We're aware that we're not accessing all of our parents. So it's a plea really, to councillors and people in the room, let people know that we're here. If you get on our website, it will tell you what the remit is, the fact that we are independent of the council, but we work very closely. As DCS has shared and Victor shared, we sit in a lot of the strategic corporate meetings, and we create a bridge really between the services and the establishment, so we can take back that service user experience. But we can only share the voices that come to us, councillor. So it's a little bit, it's a bit of a vicious cycle, isn't it? If parents don't know, families don't know we're here, we're not able to represent their views. We can only represent the views that we have. And Birmingham is so huge and so diverse that actually the more parents that signed up to the forum, the wider that representation can be that we then take forward. So yeah, it was just do let your parents know at your surgeries. They're not alone, and also we can put them in touch with lots of organisations within their localities and support groups and other parents, and all of us on the committee are parent carers ourselves. So we're kind of coming at it from an understanding point of view. I've spent 30 years in the STEM space in Birmingham. So yeah, we're a fairly knowledgeable bunch.
I think it's creating that awareness.
Yeah.
I think what happens with parents, it can become very, very lonely. They just feel lonely, and it's also coming up to some extent to do. They don't want to reach out. There's a lot of self-blame, so I work with parents first, building them up, because they self-blame, confidence, self-blame, they need to speak to themselves. But again, it's creating awareness, but always
definitely, and actually I did raise the cultural issue at previous then board around, there's a real lack of understanding in Birmingham, where you've got these challenges in, Pakistani, Somali, Muslim communities, where actually Birmingham isn't addressing the cultural impact of that and what those families go through. And when we're collating our data, so our MailChimp does actually group people by demographic and things like that, so we can look at what specific support we can put in. It's just that we are a voluntary organisation, and there's only 7 of us, so we're working as hard as we can. But yeah, definitely look stuff in and send
it's just touching on really quick, exactly what you said. When I'm working with the parents, reaching out to them, before we can actually talk about what services is available, it's sort of making them feel the cultural impact comes into it. Why is it me? Has someone done something on me? So they want to reach out to spiritual healers before they want to go out down the medical route. So it's like re-education, say, look, get that awareness out there, speaking to them, telling them it's that help. There is help out there, and it's not targeted at you. It hasn't, no one has done anything on you. Because the mind will go towards another route, because it's easier to blame than to deal with. Road probably ahead is probably a lot longer. We have to educate the parents. There is help out there. It's a certain way that we can do it.
Absolutely, and it was flagged too. It was flagged actually in a case study that was presented at last Zen board. And also on your point about empowering parents, actually what we do is we can ensure that they're sitting in meetings where they feel that they're a part of the process and they're solution focused, which sort of, a bonus of that is that they do then feel empowered, because they're playing their part in legislation and policies and shaping the services moving forward. So it's somewhat secondary to the primary need that you're talking about getting them in a place where they understand that it's not their fault and all the cultural aspects. But then, secondary, where a lot of those parents move on to is actually they become a part of the solution, which in itself is really empowering. But within that, we can actually signpost them to support groups and organisations that can help do that and take the loneliness away.
Thanks.
Sorry, Chair.
No, it's fine, Sophia. I've been very relaxed today, but we have to understand that we are really over time today because of the problems that we've had. And, I want to say thank you very much to Victor and to Sue, especially to Sue for your commitment because, we committed to drive the improvement that's necessary. We're all here for the same reason. And that is to ensure that we get the transformation that we need for the service so that our SEND children get the support and services that they deserve and need. So it's really important. There's been some really good contributions today. I know that Sue will take them away and, take all of the points on board. We do need to decide on whether we want Sue back in our September meeting to give us a further update on the SEND improvement plan. I think given the ground that we covered today, it shows that there's so much for us to talk about that it would be really important. And I think, Sue, if the committee agrees with me that we would like you back in September to, to pick up on the action points and issues that have been raised today, if that's okay. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for your patience because I know it's been a long morning already, and particularly Mike, thank you for your patience because you're up next to give us an update on the homeschool transport and hopefully to provide us with some reassurances that we are in a much different place than we were this time last year.
Well, I certainly hope I can do that. I'm 5.5 hours to get here, so it's been a big build-up. Now, what I will say is that the presentation itself probably would take up the rest of our allotted time. So what I'm going to do is presume that people have read it. I'm going to fly through it in 5 minutes so that we've got the maximum amount of time. I know that there are some questions coming from some of the members, so let's just try and get through it. Who's driving the slides?
I am.
Right, okay, good. So if we move on, very, very quickly, I'm sure you've read this, we recognise where the service came from, not just in September 21, but in previous years. The comments around poor data, poor planning, lack of control, and the honest truth, children were not at the heart of our service. And you're going to find this is a recurring theme. If we move on, things that we've done. We have made significant improvements to the way that we gather and store data. It is not yet complete, but we're very close. We are at the point of using phase 1 of our transport management system, which is an integrated element of the 365 product that I'm sure you've all heard of, and a SharePoint system around it. It is starting to deliver benefits for us, and those benefits come in the speed at which we can do things. It's not that we're doing less, it's just that we're doing it quicker. Yes, we're developing KPIs, but we're nowhere near at the point of publishing those just yet. Our planning for September is well advanced. The number of reviews already taking place is in the high thousands. The personal transport budget information is ready to go out. Some of it, in fact, already has gone out. The bus passes, again, the letters are all ready to go. Believe it or not, the problem we had with that was trying to find a mail merge facility. Who knew that would be a problem? You would think that there must be many occasions when the council sends out thousands and thousands of letters. But we couldn't quite find the vehicle for it. The problem that's been solved, but still it was a problem. We've done a lot of work with Sabia's group to try and make sure that there is clear visibility about what we're doing. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a challenging thing, especially when something goes wrong, but we'll hopefully come back onto that in a minute. A lot of strong change control and new governance around stuff that's happening in the transformation programme. I am not going to go into the details of the transformation programme. We could be here till this time tomorrow if I did. There is so much happening. But the one thing that I can absolutely promise you, children are very much at the heart of our service now. And the story about the child with the AGP condition is indicative of not only what's changed, but it's indicative of the service that I want to leave. Because this was a child who didn't want to be sitting in a taxi on his own with an adult. He wanted to travel with his friends. But because of the rules around AGP and COVID, it couldn't happen. So as soon as that changed, he was on to us saying that he wanted to travel with his mates. And it was a challenge because it turns out national guidance and Birmingham's guidance were out of sync and Birmingham's was behind national. So we had to get that changed, but we managed to do all of that in 7 days. And he went back into a vehicle with his friends. And in fact, we've made similar changes in around 50 cases now. But that's all because one child contacted and said, I want to travel with my friends. So that made me quite happy. If we move on, right, this is the slide that we're really not going to spend a lot of time looking at. Lots of information about things that's happening in the transformation programme. Quite happy if anyone wants to contact me after the meeting, by email, whatever, to ask specific questions around transformation. Obviously, the headline is the service needs to transform. You know, John and I, John's my head of communications, we have this thing that we repeat constantly: perception is reality. I know it sounds a bit skew, but what people think is happening, and what people are told is happening is really important. And you know, we hear about the kind of 2.1% or the 1.8% of problem cases that we have. We do not hear about the 98% who don't have a problem. And I suppose it's like the news at 10. Can you imagine if it started with a happy and family stories? You know, the world would just be turned upside down. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to ensure that everyone understands what's happening and are given the opportunity to contribute. Next slide, please. The boring bit, creating a new structure, but this is a structure that's really built around what the service needs to do. So it recognises on the left-hand side of this page the elements of policy and control. So the rules, the governance, all of the things that control the service that we provide. Also in there you've got your risk eligibility, checking, all of the things that we've got to do to actually support the operational process. On the right-hand side you have that operational process, which is built around the travel assist programme that I'm sure councillors will be familiar with, but also a new service called travel support. And if we move on to the next slide, travel support. So what's travel support? It's a combination of things. It is drivers, it is guides, it is the pathway to independence, which is something we're really focusing on as a service. People might know the phrase independent travels training, and I know Councillor Jones, the deputy leader, was quite vocal at one of our recent meetings when she said, we've tried this before and it was the staff that let you down. So what I've got to assure this group is that we have a group of professionals who have been specifically hired to not only deliver the training, but also to design the programme that comes out of the back of it. And the key thing, unique to Birmingham, travel mentors. Nobody else in the country is doing this. This is about getting the child past the point of being recognised as capable of travel, but giving them that support when they are out there traveling. And it's not, you know, we're not promising the world. What we are promising is to enable every child to see improvement in their life through the medium of travel, benefits of travel. You know, things that you and I would take absolutely for granted. Going to the cinema, going to the park, going to watch the villa, whatever. All the things that we take absolutely for granted. Our children have not previously had those chances. We're going to give them those chances. And we're going to support them through that process. Yeah, I think we can move on from there. Preparation for this year. We need to see everything. Hence the reason that we're concentrating so much on data. We're confident that we are seeing everything. As I say, the numbers in terms of bus passes and whatever else, they're all way ahead of where we were last year. The one area where I thought we would complete by now, but we're not, is schools, getting information from schools. And I'll echo something that Sue said and something that Victor said. One of the weak points that seems almost strange to me is getting the information from the schools. So we've had a number of occasions, and I might talk about one in a minute, that happened only in the last couple of days, the heat problem. But in the old days, everything would come through the Director of Education and life would be simple. Not now. It's all individual schools. And it may sound a strange analogy, but herding cats probably is what it feels like half the time. It is very difficult, but we do our best. We have plans to improve the way that we communicate with schools. John came as head of communications. The idea was we were going to have a comms officer. Within 3 weeks, it was realised that actually needs a little team of people who do very specialist work, some communicating with parents, some communicating with schools. It is a complex issue to make sure that the messages are constant. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention about comms here, and this has moved on even since our most recent meeting, and that is that we intend to create a position called Critical Incident Officer. And we will encourage our operators also to create the position of Critical Incident Officer. And the reason for that is when there is an incident that causes a child not to go to school, I want my staff to know about it within 10 minutes, because that gives us the chance to respond, react, and solve the problem. But again, it means that the information has to get to the critical officer in the operator, who then has to communicate with our critical incident officer. We'll have two, one in the morning shift, one in the afternoon shift. And that then allows them to come to my service management team to get a solution. And that's something that's happened because of the heat incident, where despite all of the pressures we were put under, only one route didn't operate. Unfortunately, the one route that didn't operate included Savia's son. That was always going to be the case. But three children were affected. Two of the three children ended up in school. So one child missed his education because of a miscommunication between the school and the operator. And that is more evidence that communication from schools and communication around schools is a real, I see it as a critical weakness at the moment. And it's something that we have to work on. Biggest risk to the service would have been the provision of the routes, which are called the HATS routes. If you remember last year, 150 routes were taken back off an operator. They ended up with HATS. For some reason, which I don't understand, it was decided to award that contract on a one-year basis, which of course meant that HATS then had to mitigate cost in a year, which meant they charged us a fortune for it. Why it wasn't done for longer than that, I don't know, but we're having to redo it now. But we're redoing that on the basis of a 4-year contract. And in fact, the plan is that we will cut our routes in 4, and we will have, every year, we will procure a quarter of our routes. We will do so on the basis of destination-based routing. Destination being a school or a group of schools in a locality. So every council member will have or can have a direct relationship with the service in their ward, because we're all working on destination. Now, that's really important if the council has a localisation agenda. And to me, localisation is common sense. You know, nobody wants big government, big control. Everybody wants to feel as if they're close to and part of the service, and that's what we're trying to do. But it also means that each of the council members and each of the families affected will understand when their routes are going to be re-procured, so that they can understand it well. You know, if we award routes in September 23, they won't come up for renewal until September 27th. So there should be consistency, which is another thing that families want. They want to see the same drivers. They want to see the same things. And, you know, that can be done on the basis of a 4-year contract in a way that it can't be any other way. If we move on. This is just a very simple slide to say that we recognise, along with the move from education and skills to children and families, we recognise that we have a principal responsibility to improve the well-being of our children through the medium of travel. So we are becoming the children and young persons travel service. It's a gradual, it's not an instant change, it's a gradual change from home to school transport to the children and young persons travel service, reflecting the fact that we're not a glorified taxi service. That in fact we are trying to improve the lives of children and young people. And that is the shortest version of that presentation.
Thank you very much. I was just about to ask you if there was much more to go there, just because, you know, we are under real-time pressures, and really appreciate that, because for this committee, we've got a lot of new members, but they will be aware of the real problems that we've previously experienced, and you know, we are really looking for some reassurance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually see if Sabia has got any sort of issues and information that she might want to raise. You've probably already heard if she has, but I think with the lived experience of you and the parents that you're working with, I think that'd be really useful. And then if any members want to indicate if you want to ask questions, that'd be fantastic as well. But please try and keep your questions concise and on point. Thank you. Sabia.
Yeah, so we've got sort of core issues really that we're hearing from the families. The big one is the C1 communication, and actually when you're stripping back the concerns from the forum, what's at the core of that is a communication issue. Perhaps a good example of that. Families now saying that we weren't told at the time that it was only an interim arrangement, and actually had that been communicated in the initial comms, it would have solved a lot of the issues that the service is facing now. Again, comms issue, families still waiting to find out what's happening in September, so we've got quite a few panic-stricken parents contacting the forum saying I still haven't heard what's happening in September. And that's not being communicated. And I think there was, you know, I'm pretty sure there was agreement earlier in the year that would happen around the Easter Mark's, their families have got that term. The contractor's not answering phones, so again, if we're stripping it back into the communication issue again, you know, if you imagine that scenario for a SEND household in the morning where it's complete chaos and the bus hasn't turned up, you need to be able to get hold of somebody at the end of the phone. The poor comms again between travel assistant contractors, so coming back to the comms issue, it's not just the comms that's coming from the service to families, it's also that sort of, you know, second layer of the comms between travel assist and the contractors. More transparency around sanctions being given to contractors, so I was really heartened to hear yesterday. I mean, obviously, you know, it was chaos in the morning when the route was cancelled, but actually the positive that came from that was how that was then dealt with, and actually giving the assurance that there were sanctions placed on the contractor. But those are the sort of, for want of a better term, good news stories that need to come out, is that, you know, we're not going to get it 100% right, but where it does go wrong, there are sanctions placed on contractors, and that information is being utilised to shape the service better moving forward. More transparency with parents around hats, you know, which I've already touched on. And then, you know, the big issue, which, you know, maybe isn't for here, but, you know, Chair reflected before, is this, the charging of fives and the 16 to 18, that whole, I know, I'm just a messenger, don't shoot the messenger.
I've got an answer.
Yeah, post 16 parents, again, not being told to reapply in September. So again, stripping it back comms issue. So what we found this year is that parents whose young people are in transition phase going into year 12 or whatever, actually weren't told they need to reapply for transport. And so it fell upon a lot of, you know, our staff and the parent community to let other parents know. But then when we were sort of, you know, finding out the data, where it's happened, we actually did have some parents come back and say, oh, I did receive a letter. So it was a bit hit and miss. Some people did, some people didn't. And then people didn't know they needed to apply online. So again, the comms bit about being very clear at this point, you do actually need to reapply for transport, you need to do it online, and the transparency. So I guess the two takeaways from that is communication and transparency from the service, please. Sorry, that was really quick.
And Mike, you have an answer for the under 5s and the 16 to 18?
For the under 5s, I don't yet for the 16.
Okay.
16 to 18 is in development because it involves a number of services coming together to do something.
Yeah.
Quite exciting, but not yet signed off. But it's going to be something that's unique to Birmingham. But and I'm going to thank a councillor who's not present, Councillor Scott, for raising the issue about 4-year-olds in schools. And on research, what we found was that the policy of the council, which was written in 2019, was that free travel could be provided for the usual qualifying circumstances for children from the age of 5 onwards. The legislation unhelpfully says that transport should be provided for children of compulsory schooling. So my interpretation, and Sue and I have discussed this on a couple of occasions in the last few days, my interpretation of that is that the spirit of the legislation demands that we provide transport to children who are attending school. That is how we are going to interpret it. And the compromise proposal, until we can rewrite the policy, which clearly for a number of reasons we need to do, but the compromise position is where we have identified a 4-year-old going to school who requires transport, and that transport can be provided through an existing route, then we will move the child, or we will put the child onto the route and they will be provided with transport. It's a compromise position because what it doesn't do is it doesn't guarantee a single-use taxi on a new route for a 4-year-old. That's a step too far for us at the moment. That's not to say it can't happen in the future, but it can happen at the moment. But I think that the short-term accommodating children on routes that already exist does two things. One, it puts the child at the heart of the service, which is what we're trying to do. And two, it shows that the service is reactive to the circumstances it's placed in and effective in dealing with it.
And Mike, just checking on that, just for clarity, is that at no cost to the parent?
At no cost.
Good, good. Councillor Morrell.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, it's already been mentioned, communication. And I think it can't be mentioned enough, really. Communication is so critical. Especially around September time, just after the 6 weeks holidays, we always run into problems. So my first questions are about communications. What are you doing to ensure, the letters aren't going out a week before the term time, that all through the 6 weeks holidays, parents are fully informed, they know exactly what service they're getting. So if they run into issues, they know what to do. That brings me on to councillors and members. I raised this on Monday. I'm going to raise it again here because again, it's really important. Our members, officers, people in the council aware of what's going on. So again, in September, problems happen and our inboxes get full, especially for the new members. You know who to go to because again, this stuff is pretty urgent when it comes in. Parents are going to, where's my child? Right? People want to know where their children is. And that brings me on to the new name, which is confusing. I'm concerned it's going to create a bit of confusion. If it once it was before it was called Purpose School Transport, now it's going to be the Children and Young People's Travel Service. Again, are we communicating that correctly to members in particular so they know that these are not two different services? It's the same thing just being renamed. The KPIs, again, very similar to the APP, very vague. It says here we're developing a full suite of key performance indicators to measure against targets and maintain focus on service delivery. It then says implementing transformation indicators to improve management delivery service. What does this mean? Can you go into a bit more detail? What do you actually measure? How are you measuring yourself to know that if there's a failure, you know how to identify it, and also if there's a success, what's the benchmark? Right? What are we measuring this against? And finally, the really important one. The DBS checks. Okay. What assurances are you giving some MTV members and parents that we're not going to have any failures when it comes to DBS checks again? Because that's also something that's pretty shameful, really. There's no reason to provide what we've been
Probably three separate questions, and I'm trying to give three quick answers. Communication, absolutely key. As I've said, we've now got John with specific responsibilities, communication on behalf of the service, supported by two other members of staff. We absolutely recognise the need to communicate, and it's probably the biggest failure in many respects in the past. As far as specific letters around provision and whatever, they're on a timetable, right? And we are meeting the requirements of that timetable. Whether or not it was the right timetable, it's the only one that we can provide. And every parent should be told what will happen pertinent to them within the next 2 weeks. That's the kind of guideline number. We have literally got thousands of letters waiting to go out, and I think they're starting to be released on Friday. I will confirm that if you want, but I think it's Friday that they start, which is technically the last day of the school year.
If I may just very quickly add a little bit of extra evidence, that's my background is on communications and engagement, private social direction, comms for council, lots of conversation about. We are taking a full review of the channels, the mechanisms that we've got to allow us to better push messaging out. We've identified lots of gaps, fixing those. So between now and the rest of August, there'll be a constant drumbeat communications going out and massively amplifying the message through networks like Parent Care Forum, like our independent colleagues who have great networks themselves, but also leveraging a lot of our social media, but also completely to the point about digital capability and connectivity. So we'll be using whatever networks we can build within the next three weeks to get that.
Thanks, John.
Right, so to move on to KPIs and all the issues around KPIs. It's really quite simple. How many, how often, how much? Yeah. And what I hope to do, you were very kind to invite me to come and talk to your group. By the time we do that, and, you know, I hope to, you know, to speak to all the various groups throughout the council, then we'll start to talk about not just what KPIs, but how we're performing against them. I've already got data in you know, in terms of how many requests that we had and how many this, that, and the next thing, but it's not sufficient in my view to come to you and tell you a credible story, because we've only started to really get into the numbers. The quality of our data really still isn't at the point where I want it to be. Yeah, we are within 12 cases of identifying uniquely every child. We're within 18 cases of identifying every route. Now, you might think, how can you not have these identified uniquely? It's because a child and a route is a strange combination. So if the route changes, the child will have a second record. The route will have a second record. So you'll be dealing with 2 children and 2 routes, but it's not, it's 1 child. So there's a lot of analysis that has to go in to make sure that we've got those unique identifiers in place to be able to actually not report what we think we're doing, but report what we're actually doing. Now, on DBSs, what we are currently doing is we are badging all of our drivers and guides ourselves. So there's no outside agency involved in the review of DBSs. We are doing it ourselves. We're doing it above the national standards so that every guide and every driver must both be DBS. The national requirement is that either of them should be DBS. We are also completing an options appraisal within the service at the moment to look at how we are going to provide the DBS service going forward. There are 3 recommendations or 3 possibilities, if you like. The headline one being continue to do it yourself. The second one is get the HR department to do it, so keep it in the council but have another option to do it. And the third one is outsource it to a third party. Now, I know what my preference is, but we have to consider the 3 options available to us, receive a recommendation, and then I would be suggesting to Sue that we go with the recommendation that's made. But absolutely, on my watch, there will not be an un-DBS person sitting with or transporting a child in Birmingham. That I promise you. If I can make, it's a dangerous promise to make. Yeah. But that's my commitment. That's what you expect me to do. So therefore, that's what I expect to deliver.
Thank you, Mike. That is a big promise, and you know we will hold you to that. So
oh, I know.
I'm going to bring in so 3 members: Councillor Hughes, then Councillor Molina, and then to finish up, Councillor Fancy.
Thank you, Chair. I am looking forward to a stress-free start to the academic year for all those parents who do benefit from home to school transport. Just 2 real quick questions, and I appreciate that September is obviously the focus of what you've been working on so far. But I'm just wondering, do we have any information about how long it takes to process an application and how many decisions are appealed?
How many decisions are appealed? No, I don't have any numbers on that at the moment. How long does it take us to process an application? So on receipt of the EHCP, it used to be 5 days for risk assessment and up to 20 days for eligibility, meaning it could take five working weeks. We've got that down to less than 2 weeks. I cannot understand why it can't be faster than that, because it almost feels like it's a ticky box. That you fill the boxes in and it throws out a result. Computer says yes, computer says no. But for the moment, I can say we've reduced it to less than 2 weeks, but I can't say any more than that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maldina.
Thank you, Chair. And can I just say that you've been brilliant, so I've kind of taken quite in. So I must say that, you know, you've answered, tried to answer some of the things I've been to ask. One of the things you've already touched on, which is a DPS one, which is something that I'm very keen to ask. My background is very quickly into early years, specialised in very emphasis on foundation years, the language and the culture and all the aspects around child's well-being. So I'll just quickly touch on the mental well-being of considering a post-COVID as well, of young children who have disability and all the rest of the factors around it. In terms of training, I understand that DPS, you're very confident, and I'm really happy to hear that. In terms of it, could you please kind of touch on some of the training that could be staff would be having an understanding level around mental health and the language aspect around communication again there. And if you can touch on the well-being aspect as well as the knowledge around, since this rate has gone up as well in terms of domestic abuse, which might be as well. So I'm very keen to hear when those children are being transported or they're being handled by the staff, what is the level of knowledge around how will they be dealing with sensitive areas, especially children who are going through a lot more on top of their disability.
Yeah.
So please touch on that.
Yeah, it allows me to kind of maybe give you a broad answer, but at the same stage, hopefully the detail. So one of the things that we are doing within the service at the moment is we are trying to recognise a set of minimum standards for guides, drivers, and mentors. Yeah. So, for example, must be able to communicate clearly in English. Ideally, should be able to communicate clearly in the first language of the child. Yeah, now that's a lofty ambition, but again, I think it's what we should be doing. So that's where we're striving to. Every one of our guides, and the guides are our principal responsibility, are trained in the appropriate circumstances for the child they're working with. So if the child has a recognised specialist challenge, then the guide is trained in that. So we're going through an awful lot of medical training at the moment, which is one of the big things. But we're also looking at mental health provision and, you know, the other challenges which arise from time to time. And, you know, there are things, nothing makes me more passionate about doing this job than hearing the circumstances of some of the children. It's the kind of thing that actually you almost don't want to talk about because it's uncomfortable, but you have to talk about it. And recognising that what it's like to be that child, you know, that's the drive, and that's the drive that I'm trying to get into everyone in the service. Recognise what it's like being that child in that circumstance and give them the appropriate level of support.
I think just very, I'm really, thank you for that. Thank you for the question. Very quick, one last point, really quick, in terms of, it's great what you just said. So in terms of very young children who are also early years, like language is already very limited. And depending on if they're selected speakers and all the rest as well. And so you will be looking at the understanding around sensitive cultural barriers as well.
Yeah,
in terms of the multiple reasons that can come to mental health and plastic abuse and all the rest. Yeah. Because it just makes things worse for those children.
It's a very, very important point. Thank you. Councillor Clancy.
Thank you, very quick. One, you talked a lot about operational issues in the question today, which is a really good factor in the committee because it shows you really on the ground stuff to achieve. I just want to pick up on the point you made about 2019. Back in the day, when I was around still, 2019, the cabinet decision came through, and our group was according to the decision. I was in a 2-hour calling, I think it was 2 hours with a colleague of mine, another colleague, and we basically, to cut very story short, really argued the case of policy income. You touched on it today, the 4-year-old aspect and the 16 to 18-year-old aspect. It's the two things which are the courtroom. But obviously, the decisions were made, bringing the right and the policy going forward. We very briefly said that we don't talk about legislation side, so there are more and the falling pattern back to overturn. We've got the policies. You mentioned about those policies. So for the local authorities, where are we now? These are local policies. And I say that because if you have, if I was to come along to the system, but I was like in series, the 4-year-old to take in, that policy is clear, you understand it, because you factored in flexibility around it, saying because you know the legislation. Not parents, you have to do, not all the parents, and that's not really understand. It's simply saying, you're saying policy wrong, or it is what it is, and you work with it, but we know it needs to change it. We need that policy getting officially changed.
Right, okay.
Do you know?
That's a very clever and complex question.
It's only because I was in the calling, so I've got a background beyond it.
The reality is that as the leader of the sector, I work with the Director of Children's Services. I work with the parent and children's, the parent care phone. We all of us are essentially the same length. And our policy reflects an adherence to the legislation as it's written. It does not recognise the spirit of that legislation.
Which was our argument in the court.
And I would have been standing beside you making the same. Absolutely. Where are we in terms of reviewing policy and rewriting it? At the very beginning. We've only picked this up as an issue, or I have only picked this up as an issue in the last few days. So therefore, you know, I've got my safeguarding leads, I've got all of the various elements of the service that I'm pulling together to say, right guys, this isn't, you know, this is not reflective of the service that we want to provide or that the children of Birmingham deserve. So let's change it. I will update you when I can in terms of the timetable change, but certainly we are going to go to Cabinet with a change policy.
And just on that point, I mean, really that is going back to the communications, isn't it? Because clearly, you know, you have an internal agreement that the spirit of that policy extends to providing transport to children at school, you know, whatever age. So it's about how that is communicated out so that parents actually understand where the council is sitting in terms of interpreting that policy.
So we're very vulnerable at the minute, aren't we? Because we need a policy that is not open to different interpretations. So I will get a timescale. Obviously, working with corporate colleagues, we can circulate that by email. We'll have a timescale when the policy will be reviewed. Obviously, as soon as possible. Not a done deal. We will need to put some time into it, so you can't rush it. But it needs to be pacey because, as I said, we're all vulnerable, and we want to get a policy that is not open to interpretation. But this is the policy, and the entitlement of young people is really clearly set out in that policy. For the moment, we are in an area where we're trying to do the right thing, and make compromises in the spirit of trying to do the right thing. But we're conscious that that actually isn't good enough. We need a policy that does the right things.
Because it has to be equitable. It can't just be subjective. So it has to be equitable. So just on that and other things, I mean, we preliminary got you on our work plan, Mike, to come back in October. Yeah. So do you think we'd be able to bring back, you know, a sort of hopefully a timetable of policy review in October, and also any other information in terms of the points that have been made here, especially around the communications, and a real update on the reality of how it's been in September intake and where we are.
Absolutely, I think that October is probably the right time to do that. We will benefit from the wonderful service level in September, hopefully. And if by then we should at least be able to give you a reasonable update on whether we have managed to change the policy or at least when we would hope to have that updated policy in place.
Thank you, Mike. And I think, given the questions and discussion we've had, that October seems right for the committee. So I think we'll keep that on the work plan. Thank you very much. I mean, there's a lot to take on board there. You understand the history, you understand why we're so concerned. And ultimately, as in the previous item, it's, you know, we're here for our children, and we really need to make sure that, you know, those improvements are driven through. So I want to thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, I'll do have to go now.
Okay,
Apologies to the committee and to Dion and Janine for not being listening there.
yes, and massive apologies to Dion and Janine, who have come to the committee today to give us to go through the draft plan, the draft Youth Justice plan, and I really apologise if you waited right till the end, because it is really important piece of work. It's a statutory plan, and I'm going to hand straight over to you to go through it with us. We've all had a copy of it, so we don't expect you to go through it line by line, and it'd be great to have some time to ask a few questions at the end. So straight over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start and then I'll hand over to Janine. So I'm one of the assistant directors in Children's Trust. Here's a colleague, Janine Ballard, who is the head of the Benefit Service, which is one of the services which sits in my portfolio of responsibility. I did hear Chair mention some new members, so just to give some context. This new plan is not negotiable for the city. It's statutory plan, private sold back in 1998, and it's a requirement that we complete this to use the sport standards in order to meet terms and conditions around grant. Youth Justice Board, for those who may be aware, are appointed by the government to oversee the release of youth payments across England and Wales. So just to recap, go back to last year's plan. That was written very much in the wake of what's been a very satisfactory inspection by the Majesty's Inspection. It was disappointing and concerning, I would say, on two fronts, both in terms of the breadth of the requirements to identify across the service, and which is confounded by the fact that we were unaware of those issues. And we know that we do better if we know ourselves, if we know from fixing things. So last year's plan very much focused on those improvements from that inspection report. This year's plan is much broader than that, because we've actually looked further than HMI and the issues they identified. One of the main things we've done over the past year is brought in some significant changes to our governance, leadership arrangements, and managerial arrangements, both at strategic and at an operational level. And that includes the position of self-engineering who have arrived post the inspection. So both of us have youth justice background, and I'm not saying that that's absolutely essential in order to lead a service such as a YOS, but it's extremely helpful in terms of knowing what we need to look for and knowing what we need to improve on. It is helpful for all members of our management board to have a knowledge and understanding about the subject matter, which is some of the issues really, which affected government previously. So there's been a large investment in skilling members of our management board around awareness raising, training. We've got a practice board this afternoon, focusing on particular areas of practice, and all board members attend that. We've appointed sponsors across the group. And quite critical, we appointed an independent chair to our board, who's John Drew, who is the ex-chief executive of the Youth Justice Board. So he has probably the highest level of expertise which you could bring in. He applies real rigour and scrutiny. He really does. He reads everything in full detail. He asks the right questions. He brings appropriate challenge and support. And that is really important for us in terms of both the challenge and support. Because if we understand the breadth of the challenges, both for the service, this is the largest youth offending service, not just in the region or in the country, it's actually the largest youth offending service in Europe. So it's a big machine with lots of change of culture and procedure within it. And it's operating within a six-ec, such as Birmingham, which is great, has all the positive, but some real challenges around crime and disorder. So if we're looking at the levels that, for example, of organised criminality within the city, organised crime groups, I think we're the second highest exporters of drugs across the country, second only to London. Not saying we really want to be at the top of it, and we know that they are involved in high levels of criminal exploitation with our children, which is often linked to serious youth violence. And those children that I'm referring to are some of our absolutely most vulnerable children, especially in the next of other services. They would have been on the STEM agenda, often diagnosed, often undiagnosed. They would have witnessed domestic abuse, school exclusions, all sorts of trauma, witnessed serious violence themselves, and often death. So it's really important that we've got tight governance, management oversight and scrutiny, and also taking our workforce with us, which Ginny will take us through. So, as I said, our priorities now are way beyond the inspection. We've not drawn a line under those improvements because some of them still need pushing forward. We know that when they come back in, they will see improvement. I can assure you that you will be seeking your own assurance and no doubt. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Janine, who will take us through the priorities for the coming year, and then we'll have to take any questions.
Thanks, Tina. Hi everybody. Like Dion says, my name is Janine Sarah and I am the head of Chief Offending Service. Just very quickly, I've been with the Trust for about a year and a half now, but prior to that, I was the head of St Helens Youth Justice Service back in up in Merseyside, which is where I'm still from. And I've worked in youth justice for a long, long time. I've had every job in youth offending service, and I think that's kind of invaluable. I hope that before I will just briefly take members of the group through the priorities for the year we're in and beyond. But I hope what you're seeing in this strategic plan is something that's starting to look and feel very different to any strategic youth justice plan that you've seen before for Birmingham. And it will continue to evolve. This plan's been driven by research, and it really is centralising relationship-based practice in everything that we do with our children. It talks about care, and I'm not embarrassed to do so. We want to show that we care about our children and families. It takes a strengths-based approach that we've heard Sue talk about before, and I really believe that it is aligning with the vision for our children, for all our children across the city. We make a very mindful decision within the youth offending service to talk about children, not young people, because they are predominantly children that we're working with. And it's an ambitious plan, and it should be, and rightly so, and I don't apologise for that, because we want Birmingham Yoss to be a real, trailblazing youth justice offer for our children. And we want it to be the absolute best it can be for our children, our families, but also our victims and the communities that we're here to serve. And one of the things that we used to talk a lot about back in my previous youth justice service was that how we should aspire for the children as if they were our own. And very much that is becoming part of our core value within Birmingham Youth Offending Service. So we're on a huge journey, not only in terms of both practice improvement and development, and strengthening governance and management oversight and leadership, but also shifting our culture to one that has really kind of got our children, families, victims right at the heart of what we do. So, in terms of our priorities, and some of these things started in 21, 22, and hopefully councillors have been able to see some of the progress, the real intangible progress that we've made, notwithstanding there is undoubtedly still lots for us to do, like you've heard about the services that we've talked about previously. So we are about to launch our YOS prevention offer. We have created and appointed to prevention team manager. We have expanded the number of prevention officers that we've got within the service. We are well connected to the alternative provision task force within our City of Birmingham school, and we've seconded 2 prevention officers into the team there that are working with some of our children who are attending our crews. And we know that some of those children, because school exclusion is one of often a root cause for our children into offending. So it's really important, and going back to Stu's point earlier about prevention, it's really important that we get in there as early as we can. So very soon we will see the launch of that team, the pathways, and there's been a lot of work that's gone on around developing assessment tools and kind of really thinking about how we link that with the early help offer within Birmingham Children's Trust. That's really exciting because we're really fortunate in Birmingham that we've been able to invest the resources into a dedicated YOS prevention team. We're also strengthening our responses to how we respond where children are a risk to others or at risk themselves. And as Dion has alluded to earlier, we do have some real challenges in the city. So we are consulting with our colleagues in West Midlands Police, and we are working with an independent consultant, and we again are about to launch a completely modernised risk reduction policy, is what we've decided to brand it for now. So really strengthening the multi-agency partnership around children and making sure that we're also connecting it to other groups where they exist. We also know, and you'll see in the plan, that certain groups of children are overrepresented within the youth justice system in Birmingham, but also nationally. And Victor talked earlier about how some issues are kind of not just what we're seeing here in Birmingham, but also national challenges. We have plans to reinvigorate our disproportionality working group and make sure that that is connected to the other work that's happening across the city, to make sure that we are properly understanding what the data is telling us, but also really starting to tackle some of those issues. And you'll have seen in the plan that certain groups of children are overrepresented at different stages, and our children in care are also included in that. So that's a particular area of focus for us. Victims, we have a statutory duty to support or offer support to victims of youth crime. That again is an area of practice that we need to strengthen. Last year we appointed a restorative practice and victim manager. So we've got a real dedicated focus now on that area of practice. I've just seen her this morning actually, and we've been chatting about some of the issues that we're experiencing at the moment. Again, going back to communication between ourselves and a partner, that's really creating some difficulties for us, but I'm confident we can iron it out. So we're really committed to making sure that our victims get the right services if they need them, if they want them, and that's the key thing. They have to consent to that. So we just want to make sure that the information victims are getting, victims of youth crime are getting, is right. Health, and again, I've been scribbling notes down frantically when we were talking about the SEND, the HCP, and really making sure that the YOS are connected to the work that's happening there, because we know we've got more work to do around the health needs of our children. Children coming into youth justice systems, and again, this isn't just in Birmingham, but it's national, have experienced disproportionate levels of trauma, adversity, with all the things that sitting on this scrutiny panel. And we want to make sure that the health offer for our children coming through our front door, Birmingham Yos, is the absolute best it can be. The practice board this afternoon is on health. And we have an assistant head of service who has the strategic lead for health, who's going to be presenting where we're at with our journey around improving the health offer. We've established a health task force that sits underneath the Yos Partnership Board and is helpful to them. Right, so I think that's going to be a really exciting to whether that we can to speak about. Education, training and employment, we're investing again in with mission as a youth offending service and dedicated support to children. We know again that peer exclusion is a real root industry offending for some of our children when that's compounded by other issues that they're experiencing. So really excited to see what we're doing around education for our children. We've also established our own Yos virtual school register, and we've worked with our temporary colleagues to make sure that we're aligning around that with live information about all of us children, fundamentals such as our education system. So where are they enrolled, are they attending, what their attendance levels, and what are we doing with the plan, and how are we connecting up with all the services around those children. You know, go back to the aspiration, if they were my child, I would want them in school, so kind of using that as our driver all the time. And then participating in engagement, and it's been lovely here today with parents and forum, but really thinking about how do we embed genuine and authentic participation through everything we do within the youth events and things. And all of these things are priorities because we need to be working on them. So we're making steps, we're making strides in some areas, but they're a priority for a reason, and we know we've got more work to do there. I want to see children on our interview panels. I want to be co-producing the strategic plan with our children and our families. We're not quite there. We're focusing on some of the basics. And then I guess wrapping around all that, and I'll just say a couple more things, is workforce development. We have invested hugely since I arrived in workforce development, modernising and bringing up to date the training that our workforce and our colleagues within the youth offending service have. Training around trauma, grief and loss is planned for this year. Restorative practice, which links to relational practice. So, and we've got a really ambitious plan around workforce development that we're planning to draw our magistrate colleagues, our youth magistrate colleagues into, so that they also understand why when a child doesn't look you in the eye in the courtroom, what's happening internally for them and what that means. It's not disrespectful. It's an overload of numerous things for them. So, and I won't say anything about governance because Stephen's very kindly done that to me. So I think just to say, lots to do, a really committed and dedicated leadership and wider management team. We are completely committed to getting this service to where it needs to be. We have a robust improvement plan that is overseen by the leadership team. They each have their portfolios, and we are continually reviewing and monitoring our progress with that improvement plan. And yes, I think that's it. I'm a bit of a youth offending service ball, as I like to. I can talk all day about youth justice matters, so yeah.
Yeah, we have got some questions, and that was really interesting because you know, this is another service that we know has faced real challenges, another service that is going through transformation. And just to hear you talking about, you know, the need for really robust governance and oversight and scrutiny, you know, we would not disagree with that, would we? But it's great that that is really recognised. And I know that John Drew will really make a valuable contribution to that work. So I'm going to bring in this order that I saw the hands go up, Sarah, Councillor Morell and Councillor Jan. So
thank you. I just want some reassurance around the funding for the additional posts, because I've been on this committee without a break since 2015, and at one point the Yos service was in a good shape. Then all the funding was removed, and we're not in a good shape. And now a lot of the things you talked about are around great things to be dealing with, and you've talked about lots of people coming in to lead those things. Actually, where's the guarantee around the funding to sustain that? We've heard the send is broken. We've appointed a load of new people into Mendocend. Transport has been broken. We've brought in lots more people to mend that. Now we've got the OS service, which is broken, and we've got lots more people in. They weren't all broken. Well, excuse the term, but you get my point, really. I'm really. Where's the reassurance that the right people will be in those posts to see it through to a sustainably good practice, which isn't then going to have big cuts, people out, and the whole thing collapses, because we just go around in a circle. So I'm really pleased to hear about all the wider things in the work that you're doing. Absolutely right, of course.
Do you want to take that one? One of the things that we looked at when we took on the offending service and the improvement plans around the financial management of the service. So actually much of the additional resource without existing resources within the service that we've realigned. Most of the permanent positions that we've been able to recruit to. We've attracted some additional funding in from organisations such as the Police and Crime Commissioner. That would be like one of the short-term funding streams. But in the main, those new additions are on permanent contracts and they're performed within existing resources. So it's not necessarily that there's a deficit in funding, it's about how that funding is being used.
Yeah.
And just on that point, I think Sarah's spot on with what she said in terms of how we've gone from a service that we thought was ticking on nicely to then receiving a really poor Ofsted, and then to be in a situation where we've got another service that is in desperate need of change. And it's sitting within the Children's Trust. It's making sure that the resources are there that you need to properly transform that service. So I think that's where, as a scrutiny committee, we can support you to ensure that those questions are being asked. Councillor Morrell.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation. Really, really reassuring. And also just the document that I've got in front of us, it's leaps and bounds above what we normally get from the City Council, should I say. And it's funny, I love the fact that you're taking down so many notes about SEND, because actually, if it goes to the wall in September, there might be a chance that the Children's Service might be taken over, actually, because that's what we as a group, Conservative group, have been pushing for. What I would like to ask in particular is about prevention, school exclusions and exploitation. Something I'm really passionate about. I'm a part-time timetable and was excluded from school, and where I represent, frankly, we have a lot of problems with county lines, and kids that fall off the end of school, particularly demographics, and they get exploited, get into gangs, X, Y, and Z. And we always hear about this term prevention, but I always want to push more on that. Like, what do you actually mean? Because prevention for me is totally different to other kids. For me, it was entrepreneurship. So if somebody taught me how to start a business, probably, I was going out selling skateboard videos. That was my outlet. But for other kids, it's selling drugs. So, and obviously, I accept the fact that that's not right for everyone. It would have been right for me if somebody was teaching me that in school, if there was a pathway for me to come down that. But there's lots of stuff that kids are into that we just don't really highlight. Let's get you in this so that you're away from those sorts of people that are going to do you harm. So expand on that, and also I'd like to learn a bit more about how you work with the West Midlands Police and the Combined Authority. Because obviously we have a Police and Crime Commissioner and we have the Combined Authority. What's your relationship with both of them? Because the Combined Authority does a lot of work around skills training and all that sort of stuff. So are you tapping into that? And finally, if I may, Chair, we're doing an inquiry on this sort of stuff. And I'd just be wondering whether it would be great to.
And we'll talk. We'll talk about that shortly. But I have already had a brief discussion with Janine and Dion around that. So, just on the questions that Councillor Morrell has asked, I don't expect you to give a full and comprehensive answer now. But please, if you could, send something through to us that will give more information, because there was quite a lot of questions there. But if you can answer sort of basically.
I think I really like the question around prevention because I think it's something that often people say, don't they? But actually, it means different things, like you've said, to different people, and that's one of the things that I'm really keen that we do. Our prevention. So we have a prevention team that will work with early help, and children will come in when professionals, schools, parents are worried about something, and then. And I'm talking a bit vaguely because it's not yet all the I's aren't dotted and the T's aren't crossed. And then we will decide, based on what we can see, who is best placed to be the initial point of contact for that child and family. And then from that, where do we go with that? So we're making sure that our offer is one, joined up, but two, is meeting the needs of the child and the family. I think as well, relationships are so important in this plan, and to me and to our service. So, and one of the things that I've often said to some of my colleagues is, without a relationship, then everything else is almost irrelevant. It's unfair, but you know, it's losing effectiveness.
Pushing water.
Yeah. So we're really focusing hard on relationships. I'm linked also to that, and I will send some more information through. We've got a fantastic offer in Birmingham around education, within the OS education training, and improving employment prospects for our children, and the plan sets some of that out, but I will send you some additional information around that, and it includes skills around entrepreneurial courses, functional skills, you know, just really getting underneath what that child
That will be music to Councillor Morell's ears, I'm sure. So thank you for that.
And I think just to say, in terms of relationships, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner sits as a member of our Youth Offenders and Service Partnership Board. He presented at our Youth Offenders and Service Conference in March of this year, which was fantastic, but unbelievably hard work to organise for 200 people. And in terms of the West Midlands Combined Authority, relationships are continuing to develop there. I sit on a number of different coalitions across the Combined Authority. So, starting now to really build those networks, those relationships. And actually, we're about to have some conversations with the Combined Authority around health and how they can support what we're trying to do in Birmingham for our children. So
it's great. Just finally, just to say, but you've clearly got, you know, your finger in so many pies, and again, it's just reassuring, isn't it? Because the contrast between the two separate presentations is just, and you know, this is why we keep saying, if this goes to the wall again in September.
Thank you, Councillor Morell.
The trust is where it's.
Thank you, Councillor Morell.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you, well done, and I'm really impressed with your presentation, and I'm looking forward to hearing so much more and so forth. I would also like your details, anything for information, anything I could do to help support. I'm always happy to help. Right. One thing I wanted to know is, do you support care leavers for being convicted of murder?
So it depends on their age.
19.
Yeah, I think, so yes, we work with children who have been convicted of any offence. So we work with children who've been charged or convicted with the whole spectrum, from shop theft up through to murder or terrorism offences. But depending on the point at which they become known to the police, is largely then dictates where that child goes. At the moment, youth offending services are predominantly set up to work with children aged 10 to 17. So if we didn't know a child and that child, young adult, was convicted at 18 or 19, they wouldn't become open to the youth justice service. But I'd be really interested in picking up a conversation with you in more detail, because I'm guessing you're asking for a reason.
Yes.
Yeah. So I really enjoy that.
She's this young person is basically.
Can you take that up separately?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Just one other thing. How are you guys making? Because as we know, poverty has increased. There's a lot more concerns. Kids, women, kids
How are you going to be tackling that, and what have you already got in plan for that?
I mean, that is just such a huge challenge, not just for us as a youth offender service, but for everybody.
Do you want me to come along that?
Because there might be something in terms of trust, the more broader.
Yeah, I mean, we're taxing, we don't exist in isolation. I think one of the issues with the offenders in the past is it did kind of sit on an island on its own. It's a multi-agency team that operated in isolation from the wider services and partnerships. And I suppose it's just being mindful that even though I spoke about this being the largest youth offender service in Europe, it's still relatively small in terms of the scope of the issues within Birmingham. So whilst we have statutory responsibility for effective delivery of youth justice services, that can be by other people. It's not all by the youth offending service. So we tap into those wide initiatives such as early help. We have a strong relationship with Empower You, which is the exploitation hub. So I think that Claire Graham presented scrutiny in March. So that's one of my heads of service, which works closely with Janine. So we join up. We have a care leading service. You know, again, around adolescents, so they support for the young person that you mentioned, they could provide some of that. So we take a rounded approach. We have some statutory things that we must do as a service. We take a very, very holistic approach to what the issues are.
And it's that relationship-based approach, isn't it, that recognises that children and young people are victims and perpetrators at the same time, which is, you know, what you're saying about kids grooming kids. It's recognising that and working with them based on that recognition. So one final question from Councillor Bano, and then I'm going to very quickly cover the rest of the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic, very interesting presentation. Just a couple of points I just want to touch on. You mentioned about the ACE mod. One thing what I worked with is in police mod, all frontline staff are ACE mod, ACE trained, which I think is so important. From the police to the teachers to youth workers, everyone to be ACE involved. It's very easy to call someone a criminal who does something but it's understanding the reason behind it and why must be committed. So that is something I think we need to be working to.
And I just respond to that very briefly, just and there's probably more work that we do need to do, but we've done quite a substantial amount of work across the West Midlands. Bernardo's were commissioned to deliver some work. So and certainly in Kpis custody suite, the officers there have received training and we've been doing some work to make the spaces more trauma responsive.
We need more.
We do.
So I was involved in that.
Yeah. So we started, but more to do, yeah.
Absolutely. On the prevention side, 4 years ago, which I know at the moment has been stopped COVID, there was a lot of stuff that had been stopped COVID. 4 years ago, I used to go into schools and used to do workshops, and I did workshops on mental health, child sexual exploitation, and what was the most interesting one was what's a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship. And the feedback that we got from that was actually shocking, because what really is unhealthy to the youth was very, well, she's my girlfriend, my boyfriend, I'm allowed to do this. But it's that information, engaging that conversation and getting that information back out there, raising that awareness back out there. That forms a form of prevention of getting the children, getting the young people to understand, take responsibility for their actions and knowing the dangers of social media and post. That sort of thing. Also, mentioned you work with youth offenders up to the age of 18, is it 17?
10 to 17, but yeah, so right up until their 18th birthday, but beyond if.
What we see at the moment is a rise in exam housing and HMOs. So as you have, I work with young people who have hit the age of 18, they get onto universal credit, they get to 19, they're entitled to universal credit. They then become exploited by criminals to come into these homes. These houses there, you have issues of crime, you've got county lines happening, you've got cooling happening, where because there's been an element of special education needs, and there is a correlation between SEN and county lines. Yes. Then they get groomed coming into these exempt houses. I'm pro going to the exempt houses and doing my assessments with these people back again. They groomed in there because they don't see any other alternative to a free accommodation because of benefit, they end up falling to the point of modern slavery, where they're being exploited to do some work, which in general is less than £2 an hour. But because if they don't do that work, there's no extra income coming in. If they go and get a job, they will lose their fantastic information because they will use it. There's a whole increase of that happening.
Thank you. I comment. So you'd be pleased to know that we are aware of these issues and with activity in the city. So the Community Safety Partnership are leading on the serious violence strategy, which will include focus on often organised criminal testing of the groomers who are setting up these accommodations and rooms. You're absolutely correct. It's a national issue, not just a Birmingham.
And yeah, I mean, those are really good points. And as Dion said, you know, it has to be that partnership approach to a lot of these bigger issues, because they're not just for one organisation to resolve. I think that there's been hopefully a lot of feedback on your draft plan and the work that you're doing, and I hope that you get that we are really very pleased to hear just the passion more than anything, and the focus on a modernisation of the service to really provide what it needs to provide for the children and young people in the city. So I want to thank you very much for coming, and please do send through any information that you think we would find useful over the course of the work that you're doing. It doesn't just have to, be in relation to what's been discussed today, but anything you think would be of use to us or of information, we're happy to receive it. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, just in relation to the inquiry that's been mentioned, a colleague in the team of media will be leading on that. So just to mention, this will not be a different name that comes with the email when it comes through.
Yes. Brilliant. So thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to just fly through the remainder of the agenda. I'm really grateful to everybody.
I do actually have anything, but it shouldn't take too long.
Okay. So we're going to move on to item 10, which is the work programme. So we need to agree what we've got down for September, bearing in mind the discussions that we've had today. And those, we agreed that we would have send improvement back in September. We've also got John Coughlin, the Send Commissioner, scheduled to come to talk to us as well. So I was that in October, thank you, Amanda. That's going to be in October. So we've got the September. Oh, yeah. We've also got the Cabinet Member Karen McCarthy coming to provide a summary of her Cabinet priorities. So is everybody okay with that? Yeah, brilliant. The Coordinating Committee met last week, so I just wanted to give an update on the inquiries that have been agreed at the Coordinating Committee. And for this committee, it's been agreed that we lead on the inquiry around child criminal exploitation and county lines, and also that we will jointly undertake an inquiry into young people mental health after COVID, and that will be led by the Health and Adult Social Care Committee. But members from this committee will be involved in that inquiry if they wish to be so. So really what I need is for expressions of interest, both for the inquiry that we'll be leading on and also the health inquiry. And if you could send those through to me by Friday, that would be really useful. And I'll also email out to all colleagues, because given the overrun of this meeting, we have got colleagues that have had to go on because they've got other commitments. So that would be brilliant.
Chair, I'll raise it now rather than any other business.
Yeah.
It is probably, it's something I want to put on the work programme, but it's fairly urgent. At the Send Improvement Board, we had out of rabbit's hat a review into the Send service. And I've got an email here, so I'm going to read this out. But basically, they brought it in front of the board. The head of service came, didn't really have much time to scrutinise what was in the report. She then she had her own response, which she passed around to the board meeting, and when she left, it was then removed, which raises serious concern about what might be happening on the scene right now with the senior service. So I'll just read this out to you because this is the review criticising sending us may or may not have to do it. However, given the good reputation it often enjoyed up to now, along with the lack of openness and transparency regarding the report itself and the response to it, there is at least a suspicion that there are other motivations at play, specifically the shutting down or significantly refocusing of a service that provides support to parents in challenging local authority decisions would enable the council to point to the reduction in complaints and tribunal claims as a positive development, and restricting access to support in this way does not mean the local authority's decisions have improved. Therefore, given that, and that they might be doing that over obviously in 6 weeks, I would like to at least bring that, invite sending out all the heads of service or people from there to the scrutiny committee, so they actually have some kind of opportunity to explain to us what's going on with this review, is it as damning as we think, and what is their version of events, because frankly at the Central Improvement Board they were not able to do that. And at the moment it looks like the DFE will be going and restructuring the service without any oversight from the No Group Scrutiny Committee.
Okay, Councillor Miles, thanks for raising that. What I'll do is I'll take that away. I'll speak to all involved in terms of I'll speak to Sue Harrison. I'll speak, have a discussion, because it might be that a meeting is needed first to discuss.
Well, it's expected, Chair. I've got a feeling you're going to have pushback from Sue Harrison because and it's a shame she's not here actually to answer, because it was Sue who tried to remove the response from around the table.
Okay, let me have those discussions first, Councillor Miles. If it's deemed appropriate, then of course we'll bring it back to the work programme. But let me have that conversation first, and I'll come back to you once I've had that conversation.
Okay. Speak to Sandy as well, because at the moment, due to something else, another process at the council, there's a conflict of interest where I can't actually go and have a proper conversation with them until that's all sorted, which is why I'm raising it at this meeting, because I would like someone to go and actually provide me here so I can actually.
Can you forward that to me? That's
just to say, so we could be absolutely clear about the issues that you want to raise.
I'm not sure whether with the review itself as well, whether it was confidential for the improvement board, whether it's actually.
Yeah, because it's not a public facing meeting, so we have to be very careful, and that's why I need to go and have a conversation first.
Yeah.
But, obviously very committed to reporting back to you and, doing what is appropriate in terms of that whole situation. So if you can leave that with me, and I'll come back to you on that.
Okay.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Just on the work programme, I've seen an email that came out yesterday that where the Cabinet for Transport is attending the Sustainability Transport Overview and Scrutiny meeting on the 27th of July regarding the City Council motion that's passed, and members of this committee are invited to attend if they so wish on the 27th of July. Just on the work programme, as said earlier, the Commissioner is confirmed for the October meeting. Is there anything else on the work programme at the moment that we can't revisit in September? I don't think so. I think we're clear for September. So we need to agree the dates of the meetings that are set out in the paperwork. I think they've been circulated, so everybody should be aware of those. Approve. Approve, just to agree that Wednesdays 10 o'clock is an okay time and day to meet. Any requests for call-ins from councillors or any petitions? No, thank you very much. Urgent business about that item, Councillor Morrell, that you've already raised.
Yes, the reason it's urgent because they might be restructuring right now. There's been no urgent scrutiny.
Lovely, thank you very much. And then I'm just going to go on to authority to the chair that in any urgent situations between meetings, that the chair jointly with the chief officer has authority to act on behalf of the meetings. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience and your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you.